Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday Tablas Creek Instagram live broadcast. I have a guest I am incredibly excited about for today, the Alpana Singh, who is a great somm, a restaurateur, a wine personality, a wine TV personality, of which there are not many at all. So anyway, she's awesome. I can't wait to talk to her. Can't wait for those of you who don't know her yet to meet her. But as I usually do, while we're waiting for people to join, I want to give you share a few pictures, give you a few updates on what we have been working on here. So a couple pictures to start, and these are mostly beauty shots, because honestly, right now the work that's going on in the vineyard is minimal. We're not yet to pruning. We are just getting the sheep out through the vineyard and enjoying watching it get green. So if you want to get a sense of what else things look like here, I'll show you a few more pictures. It is really amazingly green. We're at about 160% of normal rainfall to date. If you're interested in a little analysis on sort of what that means for the winter, that was the subject of a blog that I published last week. So it is beautiful and green. We're watching the grass grow. We have our sheep out in the vineyard, so this is the time of year where they do the most good. We're moving them every 24 hours. You can see them in a Mourvedre block just above the winery. We've gotten them through the entire vineyard once, and we'll be able to get them through hopefully 3 times before we get to bud break. A couple more pictures. Give you a sense of how tall the grass is. This is my dog. Getting lost in the grass. That's what happens at this time of year. And then one sunset picture, because it is just kind of stunning out here. Okay, in the cellar, we are getting ready to bottle the first wines of the year. We have a couple rosés that are going into bottle. If you've been waiting for Dianthus or waiting for our Patalenda Tablas Rosé, those are going into bottle week after next, along with our Vermentino. And we are ready to start that cycle, and it's great because I know we're out of a lot of wines, but we'll start with those, the rosés and the Vermentino this month, and then get some reds like Grenache and Counoise and stuff into bottle next month. So help is on the way. Okay, so with that as a kind of a quick introduction, I'm going to invite Alpana to join me, and we can see what's going on in her world. So just sent the request. Hey!
How's it going?
It's going great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Can you see me okay? I'm trying to find the best angle here. I guess that's better. Right. How are you?
I'm doing really well, actually.
Your weather is much better than what I have here in Chicago. It's a balmy 36 degrees today, so.
That's kind of warmer than it's been, even, right? I mean, it's been.
Yeah, no, it's normal. It's like I would be a little concerned if it wasn't 10 degrees in January. We had a pretty warm December, and it was just like everybody's freaking out, but secretly enjoying it. But it's not supposed to be 50 degrees on Christmas Day in Chicago. There's something wrong with that. So.
Yeah, we went back to visit family in Vermont over New Year's, and it was 36 degrees, not really snowy.
Yeah.
And we left and came back to California, and it immediately dropped down to single digits and real winter.
Yeah, it's weird. It's it was actually in December, certain nights it was colder in Vegas than it was in Chicago, because I have friends who have a couple homes a couple friends that have homes in Vegas. So we were kibitzing back and forth, and just this is just not right.
Cool. Okay. Well, enough about weather. But so the way that I like to normally start my conversations is to ask people to kind of share their story into their path into wine. How early did you know that wine was something that was interesting to you, and what did it look like? Was wine on your family table when you were growing up, or how was your path?
No, well, certainly not wine. We had a lot of Johnny Walker. but definitely not wine. I come from a South Asian home. My parents are from the Fiji Islands, and they migrated to the States in the 70s. And then I was born in Monterey, California, not too far away from you. It actually was kind of fun looking at the property because I remember visiting the property. Oh my gosh, I mean, we're going back almost 25 years ago. And it was such an ambitious project back then with the nursery. And I think I was there with your dad, I want to say.
Yeah.
And it was just so impressive. And to see how it's come about. And I've always envied that sort of future visioning of winemakers and winery owners. You know, I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow. And, you know, wine folks are like, oh, yeah, I'm planning this for my great, great, great grandkids. You know, but that's that sort of forward visionary thinking that needs to take place to have what you are showing us today. The seed for all of that, no pun intended, was planted 25, 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, I just find that so remarkable because I don't think that way. And so I just think having that sort of legacy approach to sort of planning a business I find it so fascinating. But anyway, so going back, my parents, like I said, are from the Fiji Islands, and then my great-grandparents are from India, but they migrated to Fiji as indentured laborers. And then my parents moved to the States, like I said, in the 70s. And I grew up in a fairly normal working class immigrant family. But my parents both worked in the restaurant business. Having grown up on the Monterey Peninsula, known for its fabulous golf and hospitality. So you either work for the Monterey Bay Aquarium or you get into hospitality. Or you work for the Defense Language Institute. It's sort of like the capital for learning different languages. So I actually never planned on having a career in wine. I discovered wine while working at a restaurant called Montrio in downtown Monterey. And originally they didn't want to give me the job, but I promised I'd learn about wine. And William Scherer, who's a fairly well-known master sommelier now, was running the wine program. And this was before he became a master sommelier. So that's how I found out about the program and all that good stuff. And, you know, sort of what intrigued me about wine was sort of having all of the things that I'm such a curious person. And I think if you were to line up everybody in the business and sort of find that one common thread, besides the fact that we like to eat and travel, is that we're all incredibly curious people. Like, what would happen if, you know, you use this type of rootstock instead of that type of rootstock? Or what would happen? Like, why is it that that particular grape variety grows best in that type of soil? And it's just sort of that endless possibility of scratching that curiosity. Why does Pinot Noir grow well in Burgundy but not in Bordeaux? Like, how is that? Sort of my mind at, like, you know, my brain at 19 years old really exploded with all of these questions. And here I am, you know, 20 some years later, still going, but why is it that way? And then I decided to pursue the Master Sommelier program. And so I passed the advanced level when I was 21. And then I passed the final level when I was 26. And I was a Master Sommelier up until last November, the November before that. I resigned my title, which we can get into if you like, but it's not very interesting to me, at least. But it's, yeah, so that's kind of how I got into it. So it's a combination of, I didn't want to have to go into debt paying for university. I liked the business. I wanted to pursue a career path. I like wine. It satisfies my curiosity. I like to eat. And I just love the energy of restaurants. You know, and I just, quite honestly, I don't know what else to do in life besides be around restaurants. You can't put me in office. I mean, I would just go berserk. So that's that.
Do you have did you have a wine that was sort of an aha moment for you that was like, oh wait, now I get it?
I do, and it's kind of funny because it's so different from my palate now. But back then, this was in '95, like Australian Shiraz. I mean, you couldn't make it alcoholic enough or boysenberry jam enough. You couldn't make it buttery or oaky enough. Like, everything was just high octane back then, right? Yeah. And now it's like Frappato and Beaujolais. So my palate back then was very much driven to, like I said, you just couldn't have enough fruit. And it was this Rhone blend, from Charles Melton called Nine Popes. And it was a blend of Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre, and it was his homage to Chateauneuf de Pape. And I think he mistranslated neuf to nine. And so nine popes, sort of Aussie cowboy, I guess. It works for me. I don't care. But that's what it was, just this combination of blueberry and nutmeg and white pepper, and the texture was just so silky soft. And I'm still trying to find that wine. And it's funny because one of my distributors had it listed on 750, and I ordered it. It came up out of stock, and I was so bummed because I just wanted to see if my palate still agreed with it, or how the wine changed. I change, the world changes, everything changes. So, but that's what the wine was.
Yeah, that's it's interesting to think about how, like, what the starting point is. I mean, the first wine that I really remember tasting was an Alsatian Gewürztraminer, which was like a little bit sweet and, like, again, so intense, so intensely flavored, that kind of like rose petals and like exotic lychee and all sorts of stuff. And it's still something that, like, brings me back to that moment when I try that grape made in that style. It's like, again, I remember being a teenager and, like, tasting that wine and thinking, oh, like, all these things that my parents are talking about, these flavors that they're talking about, like, I taste them. Like, I can taste some of them.
I think that's why, as an educator and as somebody who trains my staff, I always tell them to have patience with people, and there's no room to judge, because especially as an American, we are weaned on Coca-Cola and, sodas, sweet things, and we love sweet things, right? And then it's just so incongruous to think that we're going to expect people to go from Coca-Cola and sweet, have our palate just calibrated to sweet things, and then expect them to drink like this austere Chablis overnight. Like, it's just not going to happen. And so you have to have these baby step wines, and it's not going to, you're not going to, like, that's why I tell people, just keep trying it. Just keep trying it. Your palate needs to adjust and get calibrated, and that can take decades. Like, that can take 10, 15, 20 years. Like, your palate will change as you change. I remember as a kid, like, blue cheese, gross. And now give me all the Cambozola, please. Thank you. Or just like, it's funny because your palate changes. And so I always tell people, just have, yes, it's perfectly okay to have those gateway wines, but then have that willingness to try new things. But even if you don't, that's fine too.
Right.
And I think that is very, very, very important, to have that sort of patience with our customers. I mean, that's what sommeliers are there for. We're there to sort of be this docent to whatever experience people want to have, and to not superimpose our likes and wants. One of my least favorite questions to get table size, what would you drink? I'm like, trust me, you don't want to drink what I drink. Like, I drink funky stuff. But I also like my Diet Coke too. So, and for me, it's a very uncomfortable question, because that's not how I was trained, and that's not how I trained, to superimpose, like I said, what I want on somebody else.
And when you're putting together wine lists, do you put together wine lists with that in mind? Do you have sort of gateway wines on your lists that you encourage your team to suggest to people who maybe are not super wine savvy?
I think it just depends on the type of establishment that you're doing. If you're going to have that opportunity to provide the docent style service and invest in the training, and to be there to explain to the guests, this is, I see this a lot with natural wine programs. I mean, I've been studying wine half my life, and I walk into it, I don't know what this is. Like, I don't know, like, where's your Gruner or whatever, and so I do expect that if you are going to have an ambitious and esoteric program like that, that there is at least some well-trained, empathetic guidance to be able to sort of take me on that journey with you. But to create that wine list and to provide no support system and to make me feel like an idiot, I don't go for that. That's when I order, a vodka soda, because I
Of course.
don't know what this is. And if I feel intimidated, imagine somebody who, like I said, just normally drinks, something that is a little bit like New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc or whatever. And so I just think, but I think it's understanding the environment, the concept, what have you, but I think it's always important, no matter what you create, that people feel comfortable and they can find something that they can drink and not feel like that they have to sort of compromise or just give up and, like I said, order the gin and tonic, even though I love gin and tonic. Does that make sense? Right?
Yeah, it does. It jives with something that I'm not sure I've ever formulated that clearly, but the idea that, like, a really great wine list is neither something which is just the vision of the somm or the owner who creates it, nor is it like just like a greatest hits list of things that everybody knows and loves. It's somewhere in between where you've got entry points for people that help them become comfortable with what the options are, but at the same time there's a path that they can take through it that will, based on where their starting point is, based on what they're eating, based on how adventurous they're feeling, bring them to things that they otherwise wouldn't have discovered on their own.
Yeah, like, I am a big fan of Tablas Creek, have always been, and I especially appreciate the emphasis on sort of non-traditional grape varieties. But if I do put like your Patelin Blanc, or if I put like a Roussanne or a Viognier, but I know that my crowd is a Chardonnay crowd, that onus is upon me to make sure that I arm my staff with the information and ability to set up the expectation for the guests, again, in a very hospitable, comfortable way where the guests don't feel like they're being spoken down on. And I think that that is a tremendous need in the business to make sure, especially with climate change coming on the forefront. And, where we're going to have to start experimenting, if not already experimenting, with different types of grape varieties that do better in these conditions that we now have to deal with like lack of water, too much water, late harvest, early harvest, whatever it is. I mean, that's just kind of what's coming down the pipeline, is places that you used to be able to support Chardonnay are going to need to have Touriga Nacional or whatever. But that means that we have to also provide that service of education and information for the guests. And I think that that is very important. And I think that is going to be a huge emphasis coming down in the future. A world without Cabernet, it could happen.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we spend a lot of time thinking about questions like that. I mean, because we're in a place which is a little bit of a kind of a tipping point climate area where like there is enough rain for us to farm without having to irrigate, but only barely. And it is very hot in the summer, but we're able to keep things in balance because the nights are cold, but sometimes it's only barely. There are a lot of things that we feel like if it gets much hotter or much drier, the things that we can currently do might have to change a lot. And so it's one of the nice things in working with the collection of grapes that we work with is that we can stay in that Rhone world and move to grapes that have more acid, that are more drought tolerant. Like we don't have to be particularly loyal to grapes like Viognier, which are going to struggle as it gets warmer. We have Claret, we have Picpoul, we have Picardin, we have these grape varieties that fell out of favor in the 60s and 70s because they were too high acid and ripened too late. And like we can move towards those things. And in fact, if we don't move towards those things, we're going to have a difficult time making everything work.
Well, I'm particularly intrigued in moving forward in creating wine programs that, there's always sort of like, okay, what is the theme that you're wrapping around your wine program? Are they women-made wines? Are they, wines made with diversity in mind, as far as who's making them, because it's a platform. Because we get to taste so many different wines, yet these are the ones that we chose to put on the list because of XYZ reason. And it's a tremendous platform just because, for a lot of people, that's how they discover wines, and then they'll go and buy it and support it and discover it, etc. And so I take, for me, it's an important responsibility to make sure that that platform is being honored. And so one of the areas that I'm thinking about is wines that deal with climate change.
Yeah.
And sort of like the future of winemaking. And this is because nobody's giving up their wine. Let's just face it. If the world,
nor should they.
We're going to need all the wine.
No, nor should they. Wine grapes evolved in places that were too hot and too dry to grow like row crops, things that were actually useful on a day-to-day basis. So, yeah. Wine should be something that can adapt to something like climate change.
Yes. Well, and that's the thing is I've been telling people, I said, what do winemakers do? They're liquid record keepers of climate. That's really what it is. And if you want to have like the foremost insight on record keeping as far as climate's concerned, talk to a winemaker, because that's all they do is discuss climate. That's just really what it is. And they've been sounding the alarm for a long time. And I think it's just so incredibly fortunate that your family has invested in the cultivation of these unique grape varieties, and we will be better for it. moving forward, because it's having options for rootstock. I mean, where else can you find Pickardon? They could discover in Oregon, Pickardon is perfect, right? And Pickardon becomes the new, Saudi bee. We're gonna make that happen. We're gonna make Pickardon happen.
That will be the success story of the 2020s. Yeah, and I mean that's part of also why we find the path towards regenerative organic farming so appealing, is that it is a way for wine to help be a part of the solution to things like climate change and water scarcity and reduction in energy use and all of those pieces. It's essentially a program that wine can be a part of that helps vineyards capture carbon out of the atmosphere and fix it in the soil, and helps reduce your need for use of groundwater, and helps move towards renewable energy. I mean, it's pieces that are that help you make better wine, while also making sure that the part of the world that supports that winemaking is a part of the solution to the bigger picture questions that we know we're all facing.
I think it's super important. I just, the reason why this, I just finished watching that movie, Don't Look Up, and I was just, I'm like, oh, it's got Leonardo DiCaprio, let's watch it. I had no idea what the movie was about. And I'm like, what is going on here? And then I looked it up. I'm like, oh my God, it's an allegory for climate change. And then I was like, oh wow, this is a very different movie now. And it was almost depressing. Like I turned it off because I couldn't watch it. And then I went back to watch it. And I'm like, as sad as this is, it's true. Like, we just don't want to put our heads in the sand and, focus on what Kim Kardashian's doing. I like Kim. She's a lawyer. I like her, but
So
still.
a question going back to something you said earlier, talking about kind of the role of a somm in helping be kind of a docent to a wine program. How do you feel like? Do you think that's what people think somms do? I mean, given the popularity of like kind of blind tasting, like the competitive blind tasting aspect of the Master Somm, the Master of Wine programs, like, I feel like people think it's maybe something different than it really is.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I never actually stopped to think, if I tell somebody I'm a sommelier, sort of what their assumptions about me, besides the fact that I get loaded every night and eat caviar or whatever. Like, I'm not really sure what sort of the average sort of, like, I should actually do some market research on that. That's a really good question. But I will say that it wouldn't be incorrect, given all this sort of rock star profiling and this and that. If you look at like the type of narrative and story that magazines have taken in the past of covering sommeliers, it's the term rock star and this and that and whatever. And it's a very intoxicating thing, particularly for young people, to get sucked into that. Like, who doesn't want to be a rock star, right? And it's I guess that what's not kind of lost in that is that to be a good sommelier, it's having that just natural curiosity and this insatiable desire and need to make people feel good. And I wish that got covered, and not so much partying on a jet, with popping bottles of Dom, because I don't do that.
Yeah, not my life either. But you're right. I mean, the things that make for good TV are not necessarily the things that make for actually doing that job in a way that supports a wine program, supports a restaurant, supports the customers who visit.
Also, let's just face it. I have yet to see a single profile where they've taken that rock star approach and have applied it to a female sommelier. It's always to like a male sommelier, and he's the rock star and like this and that, whatever. But unless I'm wrong, and I'd be happy if somebody sent me something. Although I did see something recently with Christy Norman. She's amazing. She's from the United Sommelier Guild, and it was a profile. It was such a beautiful profile of her, like with this glass and everything, and it was very rock star-ish. And so maybe we're getting to that point where we can, at least if we're gonna do it, apply it with equity across all gender identities.
Because it's interesting. When I shared on Twitter that I'd be talking with you this week, several people was like, "Oh, she's a rock star." So like literally using that. literally using that term.
Well, thank you. Okay.
And my response was, absolutely, of course she is.
Maybe if you can't find one, then that's you.
So, can you share a little bit about what you're doing now? I mean, you're running a couple of restaurants, running wine programs, but then you also have a more public role in talking about wine and food, sort of on TV. So share with people what that is.
Yeah, I got a lot of stuff going on. So just having I have a restaurant in Evanston called Terra and Vine, and having now survived 2 years during a pandemic has been fascinating, to say the least. Learned a lot about carryout, which I'm grateful for, actually. It's a skill set that I am going to employ moving forward. So I have that. And then I did have a TV show, but then we stopped taping 2 years ago at the start of the pandemic. And then the station, PBS, our local PBS here, WTTW, decided not to renew it. So I don't know if that show's coming back on another platform or not. I hope it does, but that's not on the docket for the near future. Probably the most exciting thing is I am working on a new project in downtown Chicago. I've been a little reluctant, super tight-lipped to share the details, just because trying to market a restaurant in the pandemic is really hard. And so we have kept sort of really tight-lipped about it. I won't, it's not because whatever, it's just that I didn't want to announce the project and then it gets delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed, and it gets that smear of Omicron or the pandemic, or people sort of, look at it like it's never going to open. And it's also sort of I opened my first restaurant 12 years ago. And it's a very different world now, opening a restaurant with that sort of sense of I need that immediate gratification. And this isn't a knock against, customers that they can't wait. But marketing a restaurant is very different now. So when I want people, when they hear about the project, to immediately be able to make the reservation. Instead of teasing. I mean, I remember I announced boarding house 12 months before we even opened. And people are like, it's like that woman that seems like she's always pregnant, it's wow, you haven't had the baby yet, and so that's kind of I didn't want to be that type of situation of wow, I thought you already opened or whatever. So, it's that goodwill of making sure that you capitalize and get people excited and they're able to book it and go and support you, et cetera, as soon as you're able to announce it. And so I'll probably be announcing in the next week or so, but I can tell you the name. It'll be called Everly. And it's I'm a big history buff, and it's one of the reasons why I love wine so much, because I can go down a history rabbit hole like nobody's business. But there was the place called the Everly Club, and people who are joining us from Chicago may have heard about it, but it was the most notorious, highly acclaimed gentleman's club, just put it that way, during its time in the 1890s. There was these two sisters, Ada and Minna Everly. They were the madams, and they set up the most exclusive house of entertainment in the world. It was known as, like I said, the Everly Club. And what was different about it was they treated the women fairly. And so where other places of ill repute, we're doing some really shady stuff, these women paid the girls the equivalent of $1,000 a week. They were fed properly. They got medical care. But they didn't want to open something that was just to, take advantage. They wanted to create something extraordinary. So it had the most extraordinary furnishings, art, food, etc. And the entrance at the time, this is in 1890, was at least $50 a person. And that was equivalent of, I think, $350 today or whatever it was, but it was just top notch. They wanted to redefine the profession, and they were entrepreneurs. And so, it's not like I'm supporting, that sort of, the thing, although I support sex workers, but that's not why. I love the name because I love the spirit of that female entrepreneurship and taking something where women were being taken advantage of and then making it better and creating something where women were supported. And so I kind of like that. And then it's also the place where the legend of drinking champagne out of a slipper came from. So there's that too.
Amazing. Cool. Well, I can't wait to
Yeah.
find out what the
Yeah,
where it is, what's going to happen. That's
yeah.
exciting
So
that it's
it's
happening like maybe even next week.
yeah, and then the theme and the decor is all women. So there's just pictures of women everywhere. There's one guy, it's Keanu Reeves. So there's
I
a great
approve.
picture of Keanu because he's amazing. So we don't want to there are there are wonderful men in the world, but this is my homage to the wildness of women. And it's unapologetic, and it's also something where I'm trying to make sure that all of my vendors are women. And so like I had an option between like two vendors, and one of them was a woman, and I met her like, you know what, I'm gonna make sure you get the commission. So it's just like all of that is sort of instilled in the spirit of it. And then I had another guy that was trying to mansplain how to set up a credit account, and I'm like, dude, what are you doing? And I had to
No, thank
correct
you.
him. And then it turns out that his district manager is a woman. I didn't narc on him. I just said, listen, I can just tell already we're not going to be able to work well together. And I got another rep from that company, but I wasn't pejorative or whatever. I'm just like, yeah, we're not going to work well together.
Awesome.
But, I think it's important because, the next time he decides to pull that card, he's going to think, wow, the last time I did this and tried to mansplain a woman, I lost that account.
Yeah.
And this is how we make things better. So it's a small thing, but it's a big thing. And I have to even to this day, I've been in the business for 25 years and I'm tired of it. But I always kind of when somebody's speaking to me or I'm presented in a certain way or whatever it is, whether it's in a situation, I take a breath and I say to myself, so Rich Melman is one of my biggest mentors in life. He's the founder and chairman of Let Us Entertain You, probably the most successful restaurateur in the history of the United States. And I had the good fortune of working very closely with Rich for 5 years. And I stop and I ask myself, what would Rich Melman do? And would they say this to Rich Melman? And I'm like, of course not. And I'm not comparing myself to Rich, but it is that check of, am I being treated fairly, or is there some unconscious bias because I'm a woman and they're not respecting me in a way that if I were a man, it would be a much different narrative or story. And
Bravo.
here's the thing, we as women, we gaslight ourselves into thinking, oh no, it's just us. It's just us. And even to this day, like I said, I've been in the business 25 years. This is my 4th restaurant. I have to stop and ask my male partner, is that normal? Is that normal? Am I being sensitive? Am I being hysterical? And that bothers me that I even have to check myself sometimes in questioning, am I being sensitive? And so it's been this really interesting process to say to myself that if I feel uncomfortable or if it's triggering something in me, then that's my opportunity to really react on it and try to make it better for the next person.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You're totally right. That's the way that things will change. Things will change if there are consequences to for people acting in a way that they weren't thinking about, that they were projecting. They were not treating people with the respect that they had earned and deserved.
Well, I also think it's just and then get monetarily rewarded for it.
Yeah.
That's the part that not only are you making me feel like I should edit myself, but I'm going to pay you for the privilege.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and honestly, your resume, your history in Chicago should speak for itself. If you feel like somebody is not taking you seriously, is not treating you with the respect that you should, you have earned at this point, you're not imagining that. That's real.
Yeah, it's really kind of surprising sometimes the stories we can talk ourselves into, and it's an interesting thing that's coming up over and over and over again. I really have to and I just want people to know, even with what you just said, I go through that every single day. And so I want people, especially women sitting there, or anybody who's been made to feel a minority in the majority of their life, You know, like you're not imagining it, and it's not fair to feel like you need to edit yourself. And I think that that's very important. And here's the thing where people conflate speaking up for yourself with rudeness. And that's where I always have to remind myself it's not rude to speak up for yourself. And because if you take it from the position of it'll make it easier for the next person, then you're doing a community service.
Yeah, you really are. Okay, I can't believe that it has already been half an hour, but it has already been half an hour, and I try to keep these to a limited amount of time. I know you have lots of other stuff to do. I do want to finish with one question, which is like, is there a part of the world or a wine or a type of wine that you feel like people need to pay more attention to, that you've gotten really excited about, that you would love other people to discover?
You know, I wouldn't say that it was a particular region or type versus just other interesting grape varieties. So, because I read somewhere, and you know this, I'm sure you have the exact statistic, but 80% of all the vineyard land is planted with just 13 grape varieties. And that breaks my heart. Because if I want to grow Picardon, right, and I go to the bank in Napa, I'm like, yeah, I want to plant Picardon and I want to borrow $2 million. They're going to look at me like I'm insane. You know, but if I say, hey, listen, I want to plant Cabernet Sauvignon and I want to sell like a $300, 100-point wine, like, oh yeah, how much do you need? We'll make it happen. And I think that's that really robs consumers of just these amazing experiences that are not happening in the name of commerce and capitalism and whatever. Like, I get it, you got to pay the bills, I really do. But it takes time for grape varieties to launch and gain traction. And it's just like our food system where, again, majority of what's planted out there are just 5 or 6 crops, and we're not giving these other types of crops, opportunity. So if I would say that if I could give anybody any encouragement of how they want to sort of plan their drinking for 2022, and like I said, I love Sauvignon Blanc. It's my favorite. Like, I love Sauvignon Blanc. But somebody just wrote Assyrtiko. You'll also like Assyrtiko. And I think if the onus is upon us consumers to go out there and to create that demand, so we can get a little bit more diversity and maybe turn that 13 into 25.
Yeah, that would be progress.
Right? Yeah, like, I think that's super important. And we're better for it because we get more interesting wines in our glass. And I think it's super important to be able to just go out there. And I get it. It's just sort of like, nobody thought Malbec at one point would fly. And now you can't run a wine program without a Malbec by the glass. Like I remember Aperol. I used to count the same bottle of Aperol at Everest for like 5 years. It was that single dusty bottle of Aperol. Now there's Aperol everywhere. Mezcal is another one. Like, you can't, you go to a French restaurant and you find a mezcal margarita. So I just think that people, I wish that whoever signs the checks out there just gave a little bit more credence and respect to consumers, that they will catch on if you give them time and opportunity, and it's presented in a way that's not snobby and comfortable.
We've made a whole business about that. It's and I do think that we're in a better place than we've been, at least in my 20 plus years in wine in America. I mean, there is more openness to things that people don't know yet, more willingness on the parts of the gatekeepers at the restaurant world and the retail world to try things that maybe don't have the super established category, and more access directly from customers to the wineries who are making these unusual things. Like, we don't need to convince our distributors in 40 states to sell Picardin, because people can order it directly from us, and we only make 110 cases anyway. So
I think there's been a couple things that have changed that. Specifically, millennials and Gen Z are far more open to trying new and cool things. Or like, the moms want, the tried and true, and I totally appreciate that. But the daughters and sons are like, oh my God, that's so cool, let's try it. And another thing is just social media and having these platforms to be able for winery owners to just get out there and share what they're doing in their stories, and then having the ambassadors share those stories. And I think that has been such a profound change, that it's not just left up to the 5 magazine publications to tell people what to drink, that we can get out there in a very democratic way and share our story. And I think that that's super important. So having these different avenues. And if anything, I think one of the plus sides of the pandemic is Zoom with the winemaker. I mean, we used to have this thinking that the winemaker has to get on the airplane, get a hotel, do the wine dinner at some steakhouse, and that's their only way to connect with the consumer. And now I can connect with you in your backyard, and you can give me a tour, and it's 36 degrees here, and it's amazing, and I'm tasting along with you. You know, it's so fabulous. And I'm so glad that you know, that we were sort of, I don't know, encouraged, forced, whatever the word is, you know, to do that.
I mean, I don't know how many thousand people saw my living room and my backyard in the last 18 months, but certainly many more than ever before.
I am telling you, there is something magical that happens when you go into somebody's living room and you see their dog. Like, you feel like you know that person. Like, I have a dog, and people see her on the Zoom, and they feel like Darla's got more fans than I do. They're like, how's Darla?
Totally.
Like, she's great. She's sleeping here. Yeah.
Awesome.
So it's just creating that intimacy, which I think is pretty awesome, especially in a environment right now where we feel like we're so disconnected from what's happening.
Yep.
Why got us through this thing?
Yeah, and honestly, I think that's one of the things that's gonna stick around afterwards. I don't think, I mean, obviously, even when I do start getting back on planes and going and doing dinners and tastings out in the market, like, it doesn't mean I'm gonna stop doing things like this. They're complementary.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to have both, because you can't, I mean, there's something about that background that unless you bring up, you know, big blow up photographs or something. But no, it's cool. It's super cool. So
cool. Okay. Last thing, if people want to learn more about you, learn more about what you're doing, follow you on social media, what are the ways people should do it?
At Alpana Singh. So I see a lot of my followers on here right now. So hello. But if not, that's where I am. I'm fairly active on Instagram. I'm not on Facebook, but my mom is. She's always on Facebook. Did you put it on the Facebook? I want to show my friends. Put it on the Facebook. I'm like, I'm on Instagram. No, put it on the Facebook. I'm like, Instagram's owned by Facebook. They don't watch the Instagram. They have it on the Facebook.
Cool. And you have a website too, right?
Yes, alpanasing.com. Yes. alpanasing.com. And then, like I said, I'm super excited to announce my new project in the next couple days. I just got to check on some supply chain issues to make sure. We're waiting on these windows to come in. They're sitting on a boat in Long Beach somewhere. And so once I figure out that the windows are definitely on the way, because this whole project is hinging on a missing stove and windows. You need windows, apparently.
I'll keep my fingers crossed for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you in person in Chicago, or if not, I guess we'll see each other in Aspen, I guess. But hopefully sooner than later.
Hopefully sooner than later.
Yeah. All right. Take care.
Cool. Thank you, Alpana, for joining me. Thank you, everybody else who came to watch. If you are a regular viewer at Tablas Creek, join me in 2 more weeks. I'll have Morgan Twain Peterson, the proprietor at Bedrock Wine Company, and one of the guys who I really admire for doing a whole bunch of cool stuff with a lot of the unusual heritage grape varieties and old vineyards that Alpana and I talked about today. So thank you again, Alpana. Thank you again, everybody. And stay safe out there. Have a good couple of weeks.
All right, bye.